If you've spent any amount of time watching YouTube videos, you've no doubt heard the Sigma grind set theme song. It's so annoying I didn't even want to play it here. That, and I didn't want to risk a copyright infraction, so you lucked out. For those of you who don't know what that is the song of a man that thinks he can say something profound, and everyone in the room will immediately fall down and worship the ground he walks on. Women will line up for makeouts, and men will line up for high fives. This is the theme song for guys who think that being an outsider who plays by their own rules and still manages to win the game is the same as losing at everything they try, so instead of self-improving, they check out of the game entirely. Welcome to the Sigma grind set. Today, so many men, especially young men, have been led astray by what they have been told a Sigma male is. So first, we have to actually define what a Sigma is, what traits they have, and why so few men are actually Sigmas. Finally, we have to look at why trying to become any type of personality is a recipe for disaster. The blog Alpha Game, which is one of the earliest blogs that first described the Sigma male, has what I would consider the best definition. It states, "The Sigma is the outsider who doesn't play the social game and manages to win at it anyhow." The Sigma is hated by alphas because Sigmas are the only men who don't accept or at least acknowledge the alpha's social dominance. People are vaguely confused by Sigmas. They are the guy that stops in briefly to say hi to a few friends at a social gathering accompanied by a tier 1 girl that no one has ever seen before. Sigmas tend to like women, but are contemptuous of them. Gammas, or low-tier men, often like to think they're Sigmas, failing to understand Sigmas are not social rejects. They are at the top of the social hierarchy despite their refusal to play by its rules. The Sigma is at the top of the food chain. They are at the same level as an alpha in terms of social dominance. Understand this, you are not a Sigma male if you are fed up dealing with women because you can't get them, or you can't get the respect you deserve from your peers, so you decide to exit the game and do your own thing. There's a big difference between going your own way versus being sent on your way. If you're unsure of where you are in the food chain, do a self-check. If you're truly at the top, you'll have the receipts to prove it without any question. If you can't show receipts or you have to talk yourself into thinking you have proof, you're lower than you think. It's okay to be wherever you are on the food chain, but you need to understand your limitations and how you can improve. This is why the Sigma grind set can be so dangerous. If you look at yourself and don't have the social proof, telling yourself that, well, I'm just too good for the game, or I don't need the game, or I'm just going to do my own thing as a Sigma, you're just coping, and that doesn't help anyone. Sigmas win in spite of the rules of the game. Fake Sigmas quit the game because they can't win. There are so few actual Sigmas in the world that I was hard-pressed to think of one that I've met. Even as fictional characters are concerned, they are still few and far between. Omar Little might be the best example of a Sigma that I can think of. When we look at the major characters in The Wire, we can look at the various characters and see their level of social dominance. Avon, High Alpha, Stringer, Bravo, Poot, Delta, Ziggy, Gamma, Omar, Sigma. If we look at the definition of a Sigma again, it basically describes Omar. He's a man that by every metric doesn't play by the contemporary rules of the game, but he wins anyway. He's not out for power, he doesn't rely on overwhelming force to assert his dominance, and he's beholden to his own code rather than the established one, especially when it comes to involving civilians or working with the police, while at the same time still respecting some of the traditions of the game, such as the Sunday truce. Remember, the Sigma is hated by alphas because Sigmas are the only men who don't accept or at least acknowledge the alpha's social dominance. People are vaguely confused by them. Omar did not have respect for Avon and then later Marlo, and it drove both of them insane. They couldn't figure out how and why this guy who should be a nobody was such a problem for them. It cost both of them time, money, and blood trying to get to him, and both failed. Omar is also at the top of the food chain. His reputation spoke for itself. This is a guy who could walk through Baltimore in a bathrobe and people gave up their supplies to him without even asking for it. All Omar had to do was walk somewhere and people freaked out. In an early scene in the show, we get an idea of the type of person Omar is without him even having to do much. In this scene, he is casually strolling down the street like he's enjoying a walk in the park while whistling a Hunting We Will Go. Around him, there is panic as everyone is fleeing from him. All we hear is cries of, "Omar is coming!" When two dealers see him, they panic and run towards an alley, and Omar walks in their direction, following them. Then we see this was all a setup. Brandon and another man had cut off their escape, and Omar boxes them in from the other side. It's clear that even early in the show, Omar's reputation was already legendary, and he's more than just a ruthless stick-up man. This whole scenario was carefully planned out, down to the fact that Omar knew which direction the two dealers would run in, which alley they would run down, and which direction he needed to approach them to steer them into the trap. Also in Season 1, we see that Omar is ahead of everyone else, including the police, and he is able to show Kima and McNulty he's onto them without showing too many of his own cards. When he meets with them in the cemetery, Omar takes the opportunity to plant the idea that Bird was the one who killed the working man in the towers. He also lets them know he knows all about their snitch Bubbles, something he should have no knowledge of. In Season 4, Chris tells Michael to get there early so people can't set up on him. Omar takes this to a whole nother level. He often stakes out a location and studies his target for days at a time. Omar operates like a chess master who considers all possible moves before making his own move. The amount of preparation allows him to orchestrate things on his own terms. Ironically, when he was caught off guard by Chris, Snoop, and Michael in the apartment building, it led him to jumping off the balcony, which was something that only increased his legendary status. Even when things aren't in his favor initially, it ends out working out in his favor. As he tells McNulty in Season 1, he can do things based on his name alone. The foundation of Omar's reputation is preparation. He's successful because he's prepared for everything. It would be easy for people to think he's just lucky, which is partially why he has such a reputation, but truthfully, Omar creates his own luck through preparation. Because he is so well prepared and he knows how people will react, he can steer them in the direction he wants. As he tells Ronaldo after threatening Prop Joe, "I trust his fear." There are many instances where Omar uses this to his advantage in getting people to do what he wants. One of the most memorable scenes from The Wire happened during the Bird trial. After trial prep, McNulty and Omar go to a store to pick out clothes for court. The ASA tells McNulty to get Omar
anything with a tie.
Omar shows up to court wearing his normal clothes and a gaudy yellow tie wrapped around the collar of his jacket. As he is questioned by Levy, Omar doesn't shy away about who he is or what he does and still manages to win over the jury. This scene demonstrates so much of why Omar is successful and why he is able to eat at the top of the food chain and hold on to that spot. Omar doesn't pretend to be something he's not, and he doesn't try to convince people of who he is. When questioned by Levy, Omar gladly accepts who he is and then tells the jury it's up to them if they want to believe him. Omar tells just enough of the truth in such a convincing way that the jury had no reason to believe that he would be lying. During the cross-examination, Levy accuses him of being the type of person who would do whatever they had to, up to and including lying to the police. Omar gets upset, but not upset because he's accused of lying to the police, which of course he did. He gets upset that Levy accuses him of killing a civilian. His angry reaction and defiant response of never putting a gun on a citizen also helps his credibility. During this scene, Omar is open and transparent that he robs drug dealers and has even shot a drug dealer. He's also able to do it in a way that makes people laugh. To the jury, he comes off as sort of a Robin Hood figure. He's not hurting innocent people, and he's targeting drug dealers. So to them, Levy's accusation and Omar's responses help to convince them that he's telling the truth. Levy tries to smear Omar to get a reaction from him by calling him amoral and someone who leeches off the city, to which Omar iconically interjects,
"I got the shotgun. Got the briefcase. It's on the game though, right?"
Omar has a strict code that he follows, and this code lays the foundation for his authenticity. While taking his statement after Bird's arrest, Omar states that though he's done his share of dirt, he's never put his gun on anyone that wasn't in the game. Bunk replies, "A man's got to have a code." Omar uses this opportunity to strike up a rapport with Bunk after recognizing him from high school. Bunk later chastises Omar for his share in the violence on the streets. Rather than just yelling at him, Bunk talks about the community and how Omar has helped lead kids down the wrong path. He speaks to Omar like an older sibling disappointed in his younger brother. Bunk recognizes that Omar's reputation could be used for something good or bad. Though frustrated with the commentary, Omar at least considers it because he recognizes Bunk is correct. Later, when pleading for help from Bunk, Omar uses the phrase Bunk told him earlier,
"A man got to have a code,"
showing that he was listening and he was being honest. Bunk helps secure his transfer to another facility and eventually encourages Omar to leave Baltimore altogether, but Omar tells him,
"Baltimore's all I know. You know what it is, right, homie? Man gotta live what he know, right?"
After a big score, Omar decides to head into retirement, only to be dragged out of it when Marlo has Butchie killed. Back in Baltimore, Omar makes it his mission to wreak as much havoc on Marlo as he possibly can. Omar openly mocks Marlo as someone who claims to be the king but isn't even man enough to do his own dirty work. Again, from the Alpha Game blog, it states, a Sigma can often enrage an Alpha by doing nothing more than smiling at him. Marlo is more concerned with the fact that Omar called him out by name than anything else he did. Marlo is in jail with the potential of facing serious time, and he's more upset that Omar may have called him a punk. This is what separates Omar from someone like Marlo. Omar tells Prop Joe he's not going to take out Marlo, he's going to take away everything he owns. Omar knows that Marlo wants nothing more than to make a name for himself. He knows that if he simply takes Marlo out, it wouldn't be enough. He wants to utterly destroy and humiliate Marlo, and the best way to do that was to attack his reputation. Omar goes on a spree to tear down Marlo's world. His legend grows and he seems unstoppable. However, he fatally ignores Kennard as a threat, who kills him when his guard was down. Kennard is also young, and when he sees Omar the first time, he's unimpressed. Kennard is a psychopath in the making, so he doesn't fear Omar's reputation like the others do. Instead of the legendary figure of a man in a trench coat wielding a shotgun, Kennard sees a gimpy cripple with a makeshift crutch and a pistol, and he's not impressed. He doesn't know or care to understand how Omar got to where he was. He smelled blood and took advantage of Omar's lapse in judgment. Omar was a legend on the streets, but not because he was looking to become a legend. In fact, I'm not sure we can really say for sure exactly what Omar's endgame was. He spent the entire show robbing stash houses and seeking revenge, but unlike everyone else, he was content with just doing what he was doing in the moment. This is one of the reasons he was dangerous, but also could have been a potential weakness for him. It's difficult to work with someone when you don't understand or even know their motivations, or if they don't care for the conventional metrics of success. Omar's inability to check out of the game was perhaps the one thing that led to his downfall. He had multiple opportunities to walk away but simply couldn't. His code wouldn't let him. Even if you're phenomenal at something, if you do it long enough, you're going to fail at some point eventually. Omar's tenure of being out in the streets was like a bridge too far. There's a few lessons here. The longer you gamble, the higher the probability you're going to lose everything. The house always wins in the long run, so you need to know when to cash out. It's also important to know that whenever you gamble, there are always new players at the table who don't know or care about what you did in the past. They have their own motivations, so you can't rely on your reputation to carry you when you're around people who are worried about their own. Kennard had no regard for who Omar was, and because Omar ignored him as a threat, it ended up costing him his life. Also, if you don't have an endgame or a vision for what you want, you're just going to be wandering around aimlessly, always in search of that next score. Whether you're a person who jumps from job to job or relationship to relationship, if you don't have a goal or even an exit strategy, you're just going to keep doing the same old thing until it no longer has any meaning. This is what happens to Omar.
Every time you maybe think about backing off some?
Back off to what?
Things had gotten so monotonous that it no longer had any meaning to him. Have an exit strategy. When you stay in the same place for too long, you become complacent and your skills can begin to deteriorate. On the flip side, it's important to recognize when you need to move on because you can no longer perform at the level you were once capable of. The inability of people to understand when it's time for them to move on is nothing more than a lack of self-awareness. Secondly, don't assume people have the same values you do. This should seem obvious, but the days of people holding shared common values are rapidly diminishing. Omar underestimated how low down people would go to get back at him. Yet he saw what Barksdale was willing to do to Brandon, but still acted shocked that they were willing to break the Sunday truce. Knowing Marlo as he was, Omar should have known he'd come after those closest to him. It was clearly no secret that Butchie was connected to Omar, since Joe had met with Omar in Butchie's bar in the past. In short, don't underestimate what people will do to bait you into a reaction. Anticipate what they might try to do and then plan your contingencies. Part of maturing is learning to move forward in your life. When you get stuck focusing on things in the past, it's impossible to grow, and eventually there comes a point where you won't be able to move on even when you realize you should. Omar couldn't move on. He had multiple opportunities to walk away or to take care of Marlo for good, but he didn't. He even tells Joe he wasn't going to take Marlo out, just take everything from him. Again, he simply liked the hunt too much. Omar was like a cat that wanted to play with his prey before he finally killed it. The trouble was, those opportunities come and go, and when they're gone, they never come back. This is the real tragedy for Omar. Even if he managed to get rid of Marlo, he'd be back to doing what he always did the next day until someone else powerful enough tried to take him out, and then the cycle would repeat. Redemption or progress was never in the cards for him, just the same old cycle that he'd been in since he was a kid. On the outside, Omar seems like the perfect anti-hero. You love to cheer for him when he takes out an entire crew or says something badass, but on the inside, he's a shell of a person. He has his code, sure, but he didn't have the awareness and discipline to walk away. After the shootout with the Barksdale stash house after Tasha dies, Omar wanted to walk away. However, by the look of Kimmy, she went her own way because she realized that Omar wasn't being honest. He was never really going to walk away and stay away. She knew Omar was going to just continue in that same cycle. A subtle theme in The Wire is the inability of people to move on with their life and break whatever cycle it is that they're caught up in. We see this with McNulty and his revert back to alcoholism. We see it with Marlo and his wanting to return to the streets at the end of the show. And we even see it with Wallace and his refusal to leave Baltimore and stay out of the game when he had the chance. Omar was no different than these. Only the people like Cuddy, Bubbles, and Presbo that had the courage to make a change were able to start over and make a better life for themselves. Regardless of who you are, in the real world, especially in a corporate environment, there are rules we all have to abide by. Sigma attitudes seem great on a YouTube clip, but saying or doing any of that stuff is more than likely going to end up with you sitting in an HR office. Remember though, you can play the game and still use it to your advantage. This is evident from the scene in the courtroom. Omar's authenticity actually helped him to manipulate the jury. You don't have to have some witty or sarcastic comeback to get respect from people. Think about how you can use the system you're in to your advantage, because you don't have to buck the system and play the role as a lone wolf either to get what you want. In fact, you're more likely to gain respect by playing within the rules than just trying to tear them down. Most of us don't command respect like Omar. In essence, he did the equivalent of someone single-handedly taking down a megacorporation. For us mortals, we can start small, like within our own departments, or how we interact with our colleagues. Change happens from within, not by trying to storm the gates from the outside. Ask yourself, is it the system you don't like, or is that you're not getting the respect you want within that system? Omar had the respect in and out of the system he was in, but as much as he knew how to use that to his advantage, he didn't know when to walk away. He didn't have an end game. Knowing what you can and cannot control and knowing when to walk away are powerful, and if you know how to evaluate yourself, you can get what you want and you can win. Here's a personal anecdote on this. I was with an organization for 7 years and really thought I was going to move up. I had a chip on my shoulder that just grew and grew every time I didn't get a promotion or opportunity I thought I deserved. I moved to another branch within the same organization and stayed there for nearly 3 years with similar results. No matter what I did, I kept getting told, "But you're so good in your current role, why don't you just want to stay there?" I finally got fed up and went to a different organization within the same field and ended up hating that job. I stayed there for 2 years until I realized I'm just banging my head against the wall. I finally asked myself, how long am I going to stay in this type of job, jumping to different organizations, hoping that things will get better? Eventually, I had to face the fact that I needed to start over with a new career path, in a new job, in a new organization, doing something entirely different than I had ever done before. It took me 10 years to figure out I should have left the original job 3 years into it. Despite having to take a big pay cut, I was able to start fresh, but even then, I still didn't know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to be. This is what happens when you don't have a plan for your career or even your life. You end up getting sucked into things that won't allow you to move forward. I let something as stupid as a career grudge get in the way of me actually doing something productive with my career. I wanted to prove myself to people who I didn't even really care about and get back at them for not giving me opportunities that I lost track of my real goals. I spent years trying to prove I was right and that my way was the right way, and in the end, it just made people not want to listen to me. Even if they agreed with me, I was pegged as a contrarian. Don't do this. Pick your battles wisely. If you aren't getting the results you want, do something different or move on. Omar is one of the most memorable characters in TV history for a good reason. He's unforgettable. He's legendary. He reminds us of the importance of holding ourselves to a high standard and high moral code. He showed us how to be fearless and play the game to win. He's also a cautionary tale that reminds us that the decisions we make will affect the people around us, and we need to remember how things will affect them before we decide to act in our own interests. He also reminds us to have a plan for everything, especially if we need to walk away. Wherever you are in life, think about what you can control and what you can do to move forward. Sometimes there is something you can do to make a change, and sometimes it's all just in the game.